I'm Spencer Mazyck, and joining me now is lawyer turned Terra Cotta importer Lenore Rice. She is the co-founder of Seibert Rice, a leading American importer of handmade terracotta planters and urns from Italy. Welcome, Lenore. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Lenore, before we get to the very interesting story of how Seibert Rice was formed, I want to talk about your legal career. You were a tax attorney at Shearman Sterling, right?
That's right. I actually started my career at the Justice Department. After law school, I went there as part of the honors program, and I was a tax litigator for 4 years. And from there, I went to Shearman Sterling.
Where you practiced for how many years?
For about another 5 or 6 years.
Okay, so a total of 9 years of experience there.
Right.
And you left practice when you began your family. So I know some women struggle with that decision to become a stay-at-home mom. Was that a difficult one for you?
It was a very difficult decision. I took a 6-month leave of absence, which stretched into a 2-year leave of absence before I could bring myself to actually resign. And the firm was very supportive and great about it, but it's a very hard decision.
Well, did you always know, though, that at a certain point you would re-enter the workforce after X number of years?
Well, I thought I would continue to be a lawyer, and in fact, when I worked at Shearman, I was a member of the New York bar. So after I left, I took the New Jersey bar, and I was thinking about actually starting my own practice when this opportunity came along, and I said, okay, I'll give it a try, and it's been 20 years.
So tell us about that Tuscany vacation that transformed your life, changed your life forever. How did you stumble into becoming a terracotta importer?
It was just a fluky thing. A mutual friend had rented a villa in Tuscany, not far from this town called Impruneta, and had invited a couple of other families to share in this house. And I read about the area before we went, and I read about Impruneta and the terracotta. So one day I said, would anyone like to take a drive into Impruneta and look at terracotta pots? And Morris Seibert was one of the other women in the house, and she said, I'll go with you. And we drove over there, and we just fell in love with these pots. And we wanted to buy some, and the one guy we spoke to said, oh, no, it's too much trouble, it costs more to ship it than it costs to make it. And then it became a burning passion. Then we had to have it.
But so when you wanted to buy it, did you want to buy it for yourself, or did you think of it as a business at that time?
No, we were thinking about buying it for ourselves,
okay.
To have for our own gardens.
When did you come up with the idea for business? Because I was going to say that's impressive if as soon as you saw the pots you thought, wow, this is a business idea.
Right. No, so we at first he said no, and then we went back and we kind of figured it out, and we found about a freight forwarder, and we went back and we said, we're going to buy these pots. And we we wrote a check. We thought we might never see the money or the pots, but sure enough, the pots showed up, a couple of months later. And, so this was like 1993.
Wow.
And there was nothing like it.
I was going to say, you were the first, really, to start importing terracotta.
Right. I mean, there was just kind of Mexican terracotta and machine-made terracotta at the time. And when we got it, we said, this is just so beautiful. There's nothing like this. So we said, well, maybe there's a business here. So we took the pots that we had bought for ourselves, and between the two of us, there were quite a few pots in different styles, and we had them professionally photographed. We did one little fold-over brochure, and we put the pots in the car and drove around, and we got orders from like some really impressive people and shops. And then we showed the pots at the New York Flower Show, which no longer exists, but that was, I think, 1995, and we won Best in Show. Wow. And that really kind of launched the business.
That catapults you into a different category then.
Right.
So tell me this, though, Lenore, why is this Tuscan town, Impruneta, the source of the world's best terracotta?
Well, it's the clay, it's the soil, and it's an interesting thing because this town is just a few kilometers from the Chianti region, and yet the soil changes so much. So in the Chianti region, they have great wine. In Impruneta, wine's not so great, but great terracotta pots. So it's a very dense, heavy clay, high in iron and calcium. So it produces this very strong terracotta, and it's actually frostproof.
Winterproof is as I would describe it.
Right. So because it's such a dense clay, it lends itself to high firing, and it becomes like very dense. It's less porous than other terracotta, and it really can be left out in the winter. And then, so because of the clay, this has become a center of terracotta for generations of thousands of years. So there's a real tradition of working in terracotta in this area that goes back to the Renaissance with Brunelleschi and the Della Robbias. So there's a real tradition of artisans training, and so the quality is just excellent.
So back in 1984, like I said, you were the first to do so, but now you have a little bit more competition, right? There are other importers.
Yeah, a little more competition these days, and I think the whole gardening industry has changed because people really are looking at outdoor living as an extension of their homes. So we see a lot more beautiful outdoor furniture, a lot of beautiful outdoor furnishings and planters.
Well, so tell us about your line, though. You have 5 collections, right?
Yes. So we have several different lines. We have some, we work actually with 5 different workshops in this area of Impruneta, and each workshop has a slightly different style. Some are more traditional Italian, what we think of as the big olive tree planters.
Yes, I've seen those.
You know, some are more contemporary, some are more refined and, ornate. And we have 2 lines that are very interesting. One is we've recently started doing gray terracotta, which is the same clay, but pigments are added.
So it's darker than the gray color.
So it's a gray color. Well, the pots, the clay is gray when you start out, but when it's fired, it turns pink. It's a very, very soft, beautiful pink with white highlights, and that's the natural color of this Impruneta terracotta. To that clay, they add pigments that keep it gray after it's fired. And we do more contemporary styles in that color, so it's a much more modern, contemporary look. And then we have what we call the American collection, and we have American designers who design for us, and then we have the pots made in Italy. So you kind of get the best of American design and Italian workmanship.
So they send their designs then to the folks in Italy who craft the pots based on their designs.
Right.
Well, and I also want to ask you too about if these are durable pots, which they are, and they're winterproof as we just described. Then how often do people really come back?
Well, there are 2 ways actually. The pots are very expensive, so it's a commitment to buy one. So usually, the first purchase is maybe 1 pot. Like I'm going to try this out, and then people fall in love with it and they come back for more. And as their other old terracotta breaks, they replace it with Seibert Rice pots. We also work a lot with landscape architects and designers, and that's
where can some of the pots be seen?
Well, there are we don't have a showroom, so you can see them online at our website, and then.
But I mean, folks who bought them, like museums and libraries.
So the pots are in this area. They're at the New York Botanical Garden, and they're in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and at the Frick Collection, and at the Cloisters, and they're also in other national gardens like Longwood Gardens, Vizcaya down in Miami, and at the Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina.
Love the Biltmore there.
So they have pots, huge pots, and they originally purchased their pots when the house was built at the beginning of the 1800s, and they contacted us like in the mid-90s, I guess, and some of their pots had broken and they wanted to replace the pots. And so this was before the internet and before digital photography. So we said, well, send us photos and if there were any markings or stamps on the pot. So they sent us photos by mail, and we sent these photos off to Italy to one of our workshops. And one of the artisans in Italy called us so excited that not only did he recognize the pots and the stamp, but his grandfather had bought the original molds that were used to make these pots when that workshop went out of business.
Really?
And so they're huge bathtub-sized pots, and the pots are made by hand, but there are various masks and rosettes and garlands, and each of those were made with molds. So they had almost all of the molds. For the ones they didn't, we sent shards from the original pots back to Italy, and they made new molds from the original, and then they made brand new pots for the Biltmore Estate in the exact same method that they were made originally, using the exact same molds for the decorations. So,
and you mentioned, though, expensive, so can you give us just a price range? What can we expect if we want to get a planter or an urn?
Well, so for a small tabletop planter would start at about $80, and a large planter, that's about $38 40 inches in diameter would run about $2,000.
And where can people go if they want to buy a planter or an urn?
Well, they can go to our website, which is seibert-rice.com.
Okay, and since you formed Seibert and Rice, have you used your legal background and training at all?
Of course. I think life is all about contracts. We definitely use it. Life is about contracts and taxes. So, I do, all of our taxes, and especially with the American collection, because we have licensing agreements. I draft those agreements, and I file for copyrights, and we've had to enforce our copyrights a couple of times, but when we do that, I do use outside counsel.
And I'm curious, what was Mara's background before getting into this business?
So she was a banker. She worked at Chase, and so we come to this. So I had the legal background, she had the financial background, and we also have very different personalities, which I think has made this a successful partnership because we really balance each other out.
How so, though?
Well, I think. She tends to be very conservative, and I tend to be less so. And we come to the right decision about marketing or pricing or.
Well, it seems like it's been a recipe for success. So we wish you continued success.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Lenore.
It was my pleasure. Thanks.
For more information on this or other topics, subscribe to BloombergLaw.com. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for joining us. Bye, everybody. Thank you.